Yo, 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 what's going on, everybody? Welcome on into the Space Cowboy Show. We're back. It's been quite a bit, I would say, since I've been live, but here we are. We got a new Cowboy season, and we already got one game in the books. Obviously, that game, season opener in Philadelphia, where unfortunately Cowboys couldn't come away with the victory, but we did have things that we have to really look at because with the expectation that was many fans thinking we were going to go into Philadelphia and get our ass kicked, it really wasn't that. I think that there were many pleasant surprises all around. Obviously, it's one game out of 17. Each of those games are extremely important nonetheless. But I digress. So before we get started, need to shout out my guy Chris with Kretschman Media, my business partner, my friend. Thank you so much for the opportunity for me doing the show here. And on top of that, I can't wait to see what we do here. If you haven't done so already, please make sure to like, please make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, do all that type of stuff. If you go to the main page of the channel, there are the other Kretschman Media shows. If you wish to go see an NBA show, you got Dub's Room. If you want to go see General Sports Talk, you have the Mic Drop and the CEO Sports Show. And finally, if you're a college football fan like myself, go check out the Stadium Pulse. Now, with that, the last thing I'll say is if you want to support this channel further and what we're doing here, you can hit the join button and become a member. And that's pretty much it in terms of housekeeping stuff. We're back in full effect. In terms of the schedule, we'll see how things go. Just keep an eye out on community posts for that. But we got to talk about this game in Philadelphia for the Dallas Cowboys. Why? Because not only was it their first game of the season, but again, going back to what I said in the intro, a lot of the expectations that many fans had were that we were going to go in there and we were just going to play a game and hope to God we didn't get embarrassed. And you can argue that they did, given the fact that you lost in the manner that you did. But again, when you're a 7.5, 8.5 point underdog, and you go in there and you are like battling back and forth with the defending Super Bowl champions on banner night, I think that's a win in my book. And again, people will look at it and say, oh, I'm not a fan of the moral victories. I'm not a fan of the fact that, oh, we just, we needed to win that game and we didn't. You have to understand that depending on what your expectation was going into the year was going to impact how you viewed this game and the result of the game. Just kind of how I look at it. But there was a couple things I really wanted to talk about during this game. So the number one thing that really caught my eye was the use of pre-snap motion by the Dallas Cowboys. They used motion on 42% of their offensive plays, which for reference, if they had that same percentage as last year, that would have been fourth in the entire NFL. The Cowboys ranked 29th in terms of pre-snap motion, and a lot of people think that, okay, if we're going to be able to run the ball, you got to do this, you got to do that. See, this is where when I look at what we needed to do going into this year, and on top of that, going into this particular situation where you have a new coaching staff, we've seen over the past two coaching administrations the lack of utilizing motion, the lack of utilizing analytics, things of that accord, and really not being able to run the ball effectively, aside from the fact of a couple seasons. You need to be able to creatively run the football, make life easier for your quarterback. And that's exactly what the Cowboys did in Philadelphia. They made life very easy for Dak Prescott. The offensive line was holding up relatively well considering the circumstances. You had many times where I was looking at the way they were using motion. You have, Brevin Spann-Ford coming in and crashing into the interior. I was like, what is going on? Oh, are these the same Cowboys that I saw last year? Of course not. But again, I really liked the use of motion. And I think that is going to be the key thing that we watch moving forward. Can the Dallas Cowboys continue to do that? And if Clayton Adams and Brian Schottenheimer can work together to continue using that, I think that long term it's going to help the Dallas Cowboys. If they don't, we're kind of back to square one. But another key thing that I wanted to talk about was the discipline of the Dallas Cowboys given the situation. And when we talk about discipline, it's not, with the whole thing with Jalen Carter, even though that is one thing, it comes down to penalties, right? When we talk about the Cowboys and, how penalized they are, typically they're at the top of the league when it comes to penalties under Mike McCarthy. If you recall, they were like top team, to get penalized. And most of that was pre-snap penalties. And that's something where that kills your team. You get behind the 8 ball, you're forcing your quarterback to compensate for those mistakes. On top of that, it takes away what you were trying to do initially, which was maybe you wanted to run the ball on a particular play. And now, because you're 5 yards back, you need to change that. The Dallas Cowboys only had 4 penalties all of last night, and for 42 yards. And the interesting thing is that the Dallas Cowboys, out of those 4 penalties, none of them resulted in first downs for the Philadelphia Eagles. Meanwhile, for the Philadelphia Eagles, they had 6 first downs that were generated from penalties. And that's big, because when we talk about the Cowboys and them building a culture of being able to go out there, play disciplined football, we've been hearing that ever since since Jason Garrett times and things of that accord, and especially under Mike McCarthy. It's been a while. And it is just one game as well. But this is something we need to keep an eye out moving forward, because you have a guy in Tyler Guyton who has been prone to pre-snap penalties, especially last year. He had none. He had no penalties tonight. And that's where I really like what I'm seeing from this team. And we're not going to see if this trend holds up throughout the season. There's going to be a pre-snap penalty that happens. It's, it's just part of being human. They're going to make mistakes. But to be in that environment and to do what they did is definitely worth a round of applause for Brian Schottenheimer and this team. Now, in terms of the whole Jalen Carter situation, there are plenty of fans that were like, why didn't anybody go up to Jalen Carter, knock him in the mouth, whatever the case may be? And I think it was coming down to the situation of, hey, it's the first game of the season. We're going to go out there and we're going to show out. And you know what they did? They opened the game with a opening drive touchdown. When's the last time they did that? In 2024. They only did that one time in 2024. They did one on Thursday night. That is impressive stuff. And again, I'm going to say this several times throughout the show. I understand it's just one game, and that is where we're going to need to see a trend. But I really liked what I saw there. And the other thing was the Cowboys were very efficient in the red zone. They were 2 of 3. The only time they didn't cash in was when Miles Sanders fumbled. And we're going to get to the negatives of what happened and what they need to do moving forward. But I wanted to highlight some of the positives that came from that game. Like I said, the discipline, the ability for them to go in there and hold themselves, in, the word I'm looking for is composure, right? The composure of the situation. Then you look at how well they did in terms of not giving penalty yardage to Philadelphia, maximizing the opportunities that were given to them when they were given penalty yards. All around, that was great. Now, some of the negatives that I wanted to bring up during the game, and then we can go through the stats and we can talk about what people have been saying and things of that sort. I think when we talk about what the Cowboys need to do better, CeeDee Lamb, you got to catch the ball, man. That's the number one thing for me, because not only was that one of the reasons why you lost the game, it's one of the reasons why, you're paid money to do these things, and we're expecting better of you. And what's interesting is that typically when this happens to CeeDee, he goes off. So maybe that is a good sign for week 2. But I think another thing people are overlooking is the Jake Ferguson drops. And you can question if Dak didn't put it in the right spot or, he overthrew him. But if it hits you in your hands, you need to catch it. And Dak Prescott was dealing on Thursday night. So when we talk about, you just paid Jake Ferguson that money, CeeDee Lamb's paying all this money, and because this is the same things that we hear when it comes to Dak Prescott. He's getting paid $60 million a year and he needs to show up and show out. Well, he did. I know the stat sheet's not going to show you that, but he did exactly what you needed him to do. And so that's one of the things that really bugged me from Thursday night. On the offensive side of the ball was the inability to catch the football in crucial situations, because if you think about it, if Jake Ferguson catches that ball in the end zone, completely different ball game. If CeeDee Lamb catches those balls, I think that the Cowboys go on to win the game. And you need to win these types of games, especially when you're trying to be in contention for the division, especially when you're on the road and knowing that, hey, if we win this game and we got to play Philly later in the year, we at least know that we have that division win over them, so that in case we get to tiebreakers, you'll be able to beat them in that particular category. But that was one thing. And then the other negative to me was with Miles Sanders fumbling the ball. One of the things that bugged me was, and maybe this is just because of the fact that Jadon Blue was scratched because of the whole ankle thing. Dude, you can't be getting caught like that by a linebacker that runs a 4.6. That's inexcusable. He should have scored on that touchdown. If he does that, different ball game. And you can't go into Philadelphia and you hold them to 3 points in the entire second half. And you don't score anything. So I just look at this all-around game. There were critical moments. And again, the Cowboys aren't the only team this happens to, but you need to make sure that at the end of the day, this stuff gets tightened up. Because when you're in a game like that where it gets very sloppy, every play matters. I mean, every play matters either way. But I really think that those are the things that really stuck out in my mind, was the inability to score in the second half, the manner in which that happened. And on top of that, I think that George Pickens needs to be targeted more. I think that if you really want to make a threat out of him, now I understand that you got to take what the defense gives you, but I think that that's going to be what we need to see moving forward. Now, kind of just looking at the stat sheet, people will talk about the run defense, and looking at the stats here, the Cowboys gave up 158 rushing yards. But when you really kind of dive deeper into the rushing statistics, it's not as bad as you would think, because when you look at the box score for the game for the Cowboys, they held Saquon Barkley to 60 rushing yards on 18 attempts. And they did a very great job at containing in the interior. What really killed them was on the edges. And I think that's where you're going to need to improve in that room. And I think that's part of when you have guys that are young in that room and are still developing. Specifically, I'm looking at a guy like Marshawn Nealon, for example, and seeing what he can do. You're going to need to see more improvement out of that, because there was that. But I know I talked about this on Twitter /X, whatever you wish to call it, and on other channels, was defensively, I think that your weakest point is your linebackers. And it showed on Thursday night. The reason why it showed on Thursday night was because of the fact that when we looked at what they did, and when we looked at how they were just slow, that's not going to cut it. And that's why you're going to need DeMarvion Overshown back. You need a guy with speed there. And people were bringing up, and I already talked about the Micah Parsons trade and stuff like that. Like, oh, if you had a Micah Parsons, you would have done this, that, and the third. I mean, to be honest with you, yeah, if Micah Parsons was here, sure. But at the same time, how does that look for the interior? Kenny Clark played very well. And so that's why I'm just kind of indifferent with that. Now, to wrap up the game, because this show is going to be going about 45 minutes, an hour, so just sit back and relax. I wanted to circle back to particularly Brian Schottenheimer and what people's expectations were for him. And on top of that, with where we're at now, what we need to see moving forward. Because again, there were things to like, there were things that needs to be worked on. But I really think that for me, at least as a Cowboys fan, specifically one that's looking at what's going on in the realm of what exactly are we supposed to expect of Brian Schottenheimer? Now, if you're a fan that's expecting this team to win the Super Bowl, of course you're going to be disappointed because I don't believe the Cowboys are in the position to do so. I think that they can put building blocks in place to get you there, but I don't think they're in that mode right now. But in terms of building a offensive identity, building a defense that can stop the run, that's what we're looking for. And so, as I said earlier, using the motion on 42% of your plays, being able to get the most out of a guy like Javonte Williams, getting push, especially on the goal line, to score in those particular situations without a QB sneak, nothing of that matter. That's impressive stuff. And the other thing was on the opening drive touchdown. It felt like they came in with the plan and they made sure they executed it properly. And also adding the easy buttons for your quarterback. That's something I've been preaching for the longest time. And that doesn't mean that Dak Prescott can't do certain things or he's unable to read defense. That's not what I'm saying, because when I say that you want to give your quarterback easy buttons, it's supposed to make things very, very easy for everyone involved. Like, for example, I'm going to use Philadelphia in this case. You understand the quarterback that Jalen Hurts is. You understand that you need to get him into a rhythm. There are times where, yeah, he can run the ball and he can do that very well and he can play the position well. But at the same time, I'm not going to expect this dude to carry my team because I want to make sure that we minimize any mistakes. That's the other reason why you add easy buttons into your offense, because it minimizes mistakes. And we have seen, and I've talked about this, that Dak Prescott's a quarterback where you need to get him into rhythm. And then he kind of starts going along with that. I think that is one of the key things that you can do for quarterbacks. And some quarterbacks are like that. And Dak Prescott's been like that throughout his entire career. A guy that sometimes, and most of the time, needs to get into a rhythm offensively to get going, which isn't a bad thing, but it's part of the football IQ of when you're constructing a football team to understand that, or when you're coaching to understand that. So I really liked what Dak Prescott did on Thursday night. I understand going 21 for 34, 188 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions was kind of like, okay, well, I was kind of expecting more, but again, the game doesn't tell, the stat sheet doesn't tell the whole story of the game. So there's the one thing, is they need to continue to do those things, because as we've seen before, when you don't have when you have a situation where your quarterback is being forced to do more than what's expected, and you understand that, that's where you're going to run into problems down the road. So that's the one thing that I want to see from Brian Schottenheimer moving forward. The other thing too is that we need to see more consistency defensively, and I think this is where you look at a guy like Matt Eberflus, for example. And I understand with the whole way that this defense is looking different, with Micah Parsons gone, you just traded him a week before the season began. You added in Kenny Clark, so you have to integrate everybody. Sure, but at the same time, you shouldn't be having to blitz you shouldn't have to blitz at all, especially your corners, to get pressure. That is what's scary to me moving forward throughout this year, because when the game started, I put a tweet out where I was like, this looks like 2020 all over again. Like, we're able to score at will, but defensively we can't stop a nosebleed. And so I'm hoping that's not the case moving forward. But if your edges can't do their job and getting killed, whether that be in the run game or not being able to generate pressure, and your linebackers are slow, I mean, your corners played very well. You pretty much shut out AJ Brown the entire game. Devontae Smith was a non-factor. The only time where you had a problem in the passing game was the deep ball to Jahan Dotson that led to the Eagles scoring towards the end of the half, that 51, 52-yard play. And I believe it was Kyer Elam on the play. But that's where we don't want to see that. We don't want to see instances of big plays happening. And that's what really killed the Cowboys last year, defensively, that is. Giving up so many big play opportunities to the other team that you put yourself in such a deep hole that you can't get yourself out of. And so, when you look at what happened, I just think that moving forward, the Dallas Cowboys, defensively, it's going to be a rough road this year, I think. I think that is what we need to see moving forward, is they need to improve there. We'll see what happens when DeMarvin Overshown comes back. Then we'll kind of talk about what they need to do moving forward, because, again, we don't have enough to go off of a whole sample size of like, hey, for the past 4 games, this is what's going on. And so, again, looking at it defensively when it comes to this coaching staff and what we need to see better pressure from the edges. We need to see better play from the linebackers. And most importantly, and this is what's going to annoy the hell out of me, is they need to be able to generate pressure outside of sending corners to blitz. Like that's going to be the telling tale moving forward. Now, the last thing we'll talk about when it comes to the Brian Schottenheimer situation in terms of him being the head coach and what's going on is being able to recognize how things are going throughout the game outside of that opening script. Because to me, at least, one of the things that bugged me in the second half specifically, the first half, I didn't have a problem. I felt like once that delay happened, especially after that fumble, it did help the Cowboys a bit because it led to a 3-and-out, but it felt like the Cowboys came to the game with a whole different approach after that. Like there wasn't enough of Javonte Williams running the football. Like, was he gassed? Was he in a situation where he just couldn't tote the rock anymore? Which I find that hard to believe. Yeah, he had 15 carries for 54 yards, and the longest run he had was 11 rushing yards. But again, if that's the case, there are other ways you can do it without having Miles Sanders in there. Again, I think that the reason Miles Sanders is in there is because of Jadon Blue's injury, but I really think that is where I'm really hoping that moving forward that they understand that, you need to be able to understand these are the guys you have personnel-wise, and you got to make this stuff work. Because there were several times where Miles Sanders had open lanes that he can run through, and he didn't. And again, I'm a Penn State guy through and through. I understand who Miles Sanders is, and I wasn't really a big, especially at this point in his career. The final thing also, I should also bring this up because I didn't bring it up when we were recapping the game. That was in regards to the offensive line. I was pleasantly surprised with how well the offensive line held up, given the situation of you being in Philadelphia, given the situation that you basically, growing up against the defending Super Bowl champions, the defensive line. I understand that Jalen Carter got thrown out, but watching that from start to finish, I had to watch the game over again, but Tyler Guyton did very well for himself, especially in the run game. Him and Tyler Smith on that side of the offensive line, they did a very good job running towards that way. You can go back and watch some of the plays. Tyler Guyton did great. He had no pressures. He didn't give up a sack. He didn't have a penalty. Great stuff there. In fact, I believe the only offensive lineman that was penalized was Tyler Smith. Cooper Beebe did struggle in that interior, that game. And I understand that everyone is not going to play perfectly, but that's part of when you have a young offensive line, you got to go through those growing pains. I mean, for God's sake, the oldest guy on that offensive line is Terrence Steele, and he's 28 years old. Everyone is under 30 on the offensive line. And for Tyler Booker, man, a very impressive start to his career. Yes, there were hiccups along the way, as expected when it comes to a young guy like him. but I really love the potential that he has at right guard. And then for Terrence Steele, there were moments where I was like, I mean, in the run game, there were no problems. But again, I think pass blocking is what they need to focus on moving forward. Because, like, yes, Dak Prescott's mobility helped you out in terms of avoiding sacks. But, but that, again, if the weakest link on the offensive line is Terrence Steele and he's playing solid for you, I'm not complaining. So those are the things that the coaching staff needs to clear up, but I like what we have to grow off of moving forward. Now, the final thing I wanted to mention was the upcoming game versus the Giants, as we're going to see them play. I believe they're playing Washington, and you know, kind of looking at it from here, knowing they haven't played yet, they're going to play at the top of the hour. I believe. I could be wrong. Obviously, I don't care because I'm all focused on the Cowboys. That's what the show's about. We're talking about the Cowboys. That's it. Because we play them next week. You can't fall to 0-2, number one, because your chances of making the playoffs are diminished. But then again, depending on what your expectations were, you need to really look at it for what it is. And the other thing, too, is the Cowboys have had the Giants number since 2016. The fact that with Dak Prescott under the helm, I understand they lost to Andy Dalton back in 2020, but the point being that the Giants have only had that one victory over you since then, especially when that was in a season where pretty much the whole team was out of whack because everyone was hurt, and it came down to the wire nonetheless. I'm not really complaining. I mean, if you even want to super analyze what's going on, the Giants haven't really beat up on you in a long, long time. I'm even trying to remember the last time the Giants beat you by double digits, and it's been more than a decade now. So again, barring something we haven't seen historically over the past 10, even you could probably go 15 seasons, I think we'll be fine. Now, I guess the dialogue being if you lose, what happens? I think depending on how you lose is going to be the biggest thing. But we want to see, like I mentioned before, you need to be able to run the football more effectively in the sense of, hey, knowing what you have there. But the fact that you got, two running backs that had over 50 yards, granted, Sanders had the one run for almost 50 yards. Point being is that you averaged 5.4 yards per carry. We need to see something better in that. I liked how they had Kevontae Turpin being able to be in the run game to help create that decoy. And I think that's going to change as we move forward, because I think so many teams for the longest time have watched the Cowboys on film and they're so predictable offensively. And we're now in a situation where we have something to build off of. Now, the other thing as well, when it comes to talking about this team that we're going up against, and more importantly, the season as a whole, because I like to remind Cowboys fans this, because we don't like to lose. Obviously, we hate losing, right? But I want you to think about it this way. Everyone and their mother expected the Cowboys to lose against Philadelphia. They did, but not in the manner people thought. And I believe when I talked about it several months ago, when I was doing a little bit of a season, I even think I did it in the last video, last week or so, talking about what I'm expecting of how the schedule looked, what I think the team looks like. I expected them to lose in week 1. I'm expecting them to go out and take care of business in week 2. I'm not saying the Giants are a pushover. I never said this in this particular show. I never said that in the offseason. The only thing I said is that historically the Cowboys have had their number regardless of what they put on paper. And granted, the Giants have been run like one of the worst run organizations in all of football. But knowing what they're doing now, they have a quarterback that should be better than Daniel Jones. Maybe. Who knows? I think offensively, they have gotten an offensive line that looks solid. And what really scares me is that defensive line and the defense for the Giants. I think they've done a great job of constructing a core over there that really, you're now at a point where you're really just a quarterback away. And so if that is the case, then that's going to say a lot moving forward about, hey, can this offensive line hold it down? Hey, can Dak Prescott continue playing at a high level? Can we see CeeDee Lamb? I mean, CeeDee Lamb had 110. He should have had over 200 yards in this game against Philadelphia, but he didn't. And the last thing, looking at the stat sheet, George Pickens, 3 receptions for 30 yards. I think that's going to change. And with this receiving room, it's clear to me, and this is where I get very annoyed, and I want to see this moving forward. I need to see Kevontae Turpin be wide receiver 3. I understand the Jalen Tolbert contract year, you name it, but there were plays that happened in that game against Philadelphia. Like, there was a screenplay, and I was watching. I couldn't believe this. I was watching Jalen Tolbert just get punked, basically. Like, he didn't want to block. And that's what irked the living hell out of me. And on top of that, I think that Kevontae Turpin scares defenses more than Jalen Tolbert. And I'm not saying Jalen Tolbert's a terrible player by any stretch of the imagination. I believe that if you really want to make this offense really go, having CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, you have a solid pass catcher in Jake Ferguson out there, and you throw Kevontae Turpin into that mix, now there's a lot more that you can open up offensively. If you want to run the ball, you can have him go into motion. If you really want to get other dudes the ball, and on top of that, looking at what Kevontae Turpin can do with his speed, that's what I want to see moving forward. Because if you don't have that, then it is what it is. Now, the other thing as well when it comes to this game upcoming against the Giants is that, like I said, you can't start 0-2, but the other thing is, no, because the Cowboys haven't started 0-2 since 2010, right? That year when Romo got hurt and he broke his collarbone. That's the last time the Cowboys started 0-2. And for, looking at how this team responds after losses, they start the season 1-1 most of the time. I really want to see how this team responds after a loss, especially in the manner that it was. Because that's going to say a lot more about the character of this team than anything else, right? I've said it several times over, and I'm going to say it in this show many times. I don't even say it in the videos that I put out. The Dallas Cowboys, point blank period, need to show me who they are under Brian Schottenheimer. Are they going to have a game plan moving forward? Are they going to be in a situation where every week, like it was under Mike McCarthy, and I'll even throw Jason Garrett in there, it's like we don't know what the hell we're doing after that one game where we lost, or hey, we won this one game and we look completely different. And also closing out games. And I think that's going to be the focal point moving forward for me as I'm analyzing this Cowboys team. I'm telling you right now, guys, this is a team that they're trying to build towards 2026. And you can even throw in 2027. That doesn't mean that, they're barred of any wrongdoing or mistakes. I'm not saying that. What I'm just saying is that what we need to do as Cowboys fans is understand the proper expectations for this team. Now, I think a lot of people are underrating Dallas and overrating Philadelphia right now. But again, it's just one game. And one game doesn't tell the whole tale of a season. But you can't afford to lose games like that when they're in the balance like that. And so that's part of this process of evaluating a new coach. And by the way, a first-time head coach nonetheless. That's why I was very prevalent on talking about this today, so that we get this on the record and we talk about it moving forward. We could talk about Dak, we could talk about the players, but again, with the core that you have, you as a front office, by the way, you said to yourself, you know what? We think that Brian Schottenheimer is the guy. He's been in the league for so long. We think that he's a great offensive coordinator and he can be a great head coach. And so far, Do I think he's on the path of being a great head coach? Of course not, because of the fact that, again, it's just one game. But if we can see consistency and good consistency, not like bad consistency where you're losing games, right? Then we have something to be excited about. I think that's what we want to see. So, again, guys, it was awesome coming back, talking a bit about the upcoming game. I know it's a bit all over the place this particular show as we kind of talked about general topics. But again, when you kind of had a lot to go through and a lot going on behind the scenes to make sure that we can make this happen, number one. But number two, the fact is, I wanted to do a video that time, talking about it after the game happened. But again, stuff going on. So couldn't do it. But moving forward, I think this is where we'll close out the show on this, just because, again, it has been a bit since I've gone live, number one, but posted something like this and regular content. So I would say just expect any videos to come out, whether it be like a preview, whether it be just anything of that accord, that's fine. I'm not going to be posting something that's like over the top and things like that, or like trying to make a video just for the sake of making a video like we've seen several times before from certain people. It's going to be strictly like what's going on and moving forward. I'm not going to just flood your inbox with like bullshit. Excuse my French, but you know what I mean. So before we close, I just want to give a couple shout outs. Coles, thank you so much for tuning in. Mike from Cowboys Corner, thank you so much for tuning in. Steven as well. Coyote, Stevie Mac. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for tuning into the inaugural show of the Space Cowboy Show. Again, apologize if it sounded a bit all over the place. We had to talk about a lot and cram it into today's show. But moving forward, we at least have a set schedule and talk about things throughout the week. So with that, I will let you guys go. I hope you have a great rest of your day and enjoy your football. If you have fantasy starting at the top of the hour, you got football coming back. So we'll see how things go from there. All right, guys, you have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.